My boyfriend of 10 months is pressuring me to go to Christmas at his family's house, despite my current health situation and not feeling well enough to travel. It makes me feel like he is minimizing my pain. Am I overreacting? Hey everyone! I wanted to share something deeply personal, something that has been weighing on me physically, emotionally, and mentally. I am currently dealing with a massive ovarian cyst, one that my doctor described as much larger than a grapefruit. I'll admit, when I first heard those words, I thought they were exaggerating. How could something that size even fit inside me? But no, the scans confirmed it. It's real, and it's as if my body has betrayed me, harboring this growing, pressing invader that has commandeered my life. The cyst isn't just an abstract medical term or a diagram on a screen for me. It's real, tangible, and excruciating. It presses on my nerves relentlessly, sending jolts of pain down my pelvis and legs that sometimes feel like electric shocks or like someone is twisting my body from the inside out. It has stripped me of basic comforts. Walking? A chore. Sitting? Agony. Sleeping? A distant memory. Every movement feels like I'm navigating a minefield of sharp, unforgiving pain. 2 weeks from now, I am scheduled for surgery. I keep repeating this to myself like a mantra, a lifeline. 2 weeks. You can make it 2 more weeks. But even that feels impossibly far away. I've begged, cried, pleaded for an earlier date, but my doctor reassures me that while this is urgent, it's not yet an emergency. I understand their reasoning, I really do, but that doesn't make the waiting easier. Every day that passes, I feel like I'm carrying a ticking time bomb inside me. And the thought of it rupturing or twisting before surgery is a constant shadow in my mind. The doctor's advice is simple and unyielding: take it easy. Avoid movement. Absolutely no strenuous activity. No lifting, no bending, no unnecessary risks. On paper, it sounds like a simple prescription, but in practice, it has completely upended my life. I've always been a go-getter, someone who prided themselves on independence and resilience. To suddenly be told that doing too much, moving too much could have catastrophic consequences, it's not just limiting, it's suffocating. To cope, I've been on FMLA, Family and Medical Leave Act, for the past 3 weeks because the pain is too severe for me to work. I didn't have a choice. I couldn't sit at my desk, couldn't concentrate, couldn't even make it through a Zoom call without my face betraying the agony I was feeling. At first, I thought I could push through, grit my teeth, slap on a brave face, but the reality is, the pain won't let me. It consumes everything. The immobility has been another layer of loss. For most of November, I struggled to get by with crutches. Every step was a battle, every movement a reminder of how far this cyst had pushed me into unfamiliar, helpless territory. But in the past few weeks, even crutches have become too much. Now, I rely on a wheelchair. This has been the hardest pill to swallow, not just the pain, but the sheer dependence. It's a humbling, sometimes humiliating, reality to need help for things I once took for granted: getting out of bed, reaching for something on the counter, even making it to the bathroom. And yet, through all of this, I keep telling myself that the surgery is coming. 2 weeks. 2 weeks to freedom, or at least relief. But in the meantime, this is my reality, a life on pause, dictated by a grapefruit-sized cyst that has robbed me of movement, comfort, and a sense of normalcy. For most of November, I was clinging to crutches, my new, reluctant companions. Each step was a calculated risk, a delicate negotiation between my body and the ever-looming threat of sharp, unrelenting pain. It felt like my independence was slipping further and further away with every labored movement. At first, I thought the crutches would be a temporary solution, just something to help me get by until my body could catch up. But as the days turned into weeks, it became clear they weren't enough. The pain worsened. What began as a constant dull ache escalated into stabbing sensations that traveled from my pelvis down to my legs. Some days, it felt as though my body was on fire from the inside out. By the time I moved into December, I couldn't even rely on crutches anymore. The exertion was too much, the risks too high. Every step carried the possibility of a rupture, something my doctor had warned me could be catastrophic. It wasn't a choice. I had to transition to a wheelchair. Let me tell you, the shift from crutches to a wheelchair felt monumental, not just physically but emotionally. It wasn't just about mobility, it was about surrender. Surrendering to the fact that my body was no longer my own, that I couldn't willpower my way through this. That loss of autonomy is difficult to put into words. It eats at you, reminds you of every little thing you once took for granted. Walking to the kitchen, standing up to brush your teeth, reaching for something on a high shelf. Simple, mundane actions that are now impossible or come at the cost of searing pain. Originally, my boyfriend and I had planned to go to his parents' house for Christmas. It seemed like a no-brainer at the time. A cozy holiday with family, a chance to unwind and share in the warmth of the season. But that was back when I thought the pain was manageable, back when I believed this was a temporary phase I could power through. Now, that plan seemed laughably naive. It's not just the journey though. Even thinking about a 2.5-hour car ride each way sends a wave of anxiety through me. Sitting for long periods is torture, the pressure on my pelvis unbearable, and the vibrations of the car only amplify the discomfort. But beyond that, it's the logistics of actually being there. My boyfriend's parents' house isn't exactly accessible, and just the thought of navigating it fills me with dread. On Thanksgiving, I had managed to drag myself up their front steps using crutches, fueled by stubbornness and a desperate attempt to cling to some semblance of normalcy. It was a mistake. Each step sent shooting pain up my legs, and by the time I collapsed onto their couch, I was already questioning why I had even bothered. I smiled through gritted teeth, tried to participate in conversations, but all I could think about was the pain. By the end of the evening, I was utterly drained physically, emotionally, mentally. I remember the ride home that night vividly. I didn't say much. My boyfriend held my hand as I stared out the window, blinking back tears, trying not to let him see how broken I felt. I didn't want to ruin the evening for him, didn't want to make him feel guilty for something that wasn't his fault. But the truth was, it had been too much. Way too much. And the idea of putting myself through that again for Christmas when my condition had only worsened since Thanksgiving felt impossible. So, about 2 weeks ago, I sat my boyfriend down and told him how I felt. I told him I couldn't do it. The travel, the stairs, the socializing, it was all too much for me right now. I explained that I needed to prioritize my health, to avoid the risks that came with too much activity. I didn't say it lightly, and I didn't want to disappoint him, but I also knew my limits. I encouraged him to go without me, to spend Christmas with his family. He seemed to understand, nodding quietly and holding my hand as I spoke. "I just want you to feel better," he said. And in that moment, I believed him. It felt like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. I had made my decision and expressed my boundaries clearly. But little did I know, that conversation was just the beginning. Of course, I encouraged my boyfriend to still go to his parents for Christmas. I wasn't trying to stand in the way of him spending time with his family. In fact, I felt guilty even having to bow out. I didn't want him to miss out on the festive warmth of the season, the laughter over family dinners, the little traditions that I know mean so much to him. I just knew, deep down, that going with him wasn't an option for me this year. It wasn't just about discomfort, it was about safety. I told him as much. "You should still go," I had said, trying to keep my tone light and encouraging. "I'll be fine here. You deserve to have a good Christmas." He nodded, and for a moment, I thought we were on the same page. He squeezed my hand and even reassured me, "I understand. You need to rest. I'll explain it to them." Relief washed over me. I felt like we'd reached a resolution, one rooted in understanding and mutual respect. I'd been so worried he would feel let down or disappointed, but instead, He seemed completely fine with my decision to stay behind. I should have known it wouldn't be that simple. A few days later, the shift began. It started with a call from his mom. I wasn't in the room when he answered, but I could hear his voice muffled through the walls, rising and falling in what sounded like a heated conversation. By the time he came back, he looked tense. I asked him what was wrong, but he brushed it off, muttering something vague about family drama. I didn't press him, assuming it had nothing to do with me. But almost immediately after that call, his demeanor toward the Christmas plans started to change. The understanding boyfriend who had told me to prioritize my health suddenly became insistent. He began bringing up the trip again, casually at first. "Are you sure you don't want to come?" he'd ask while scrolling through his phone. "Maybe we can figure something out to make it easier for you." At first, I thought it was sweet, just him trying to be considerate. But as the days went on, the questions became more frequent, the tone more urgent. "It's only 2.5 hours, he pointed out one evening, as though the distance had magically shortened overnight. "We can stop if you need breaks." I reminded him, as gently as I could, that it wasn't just the drive. It was the stairs into his parents' house, the prolonged sitting, the socializing, the very real possibility that all of it could push my body past its breaking point. I explained, again and again, that I wasn't comfortable traveling in my condition, that my doctor had explicitly warned me against overexerting myself. Each time, he nodded, but the conversation never seemed to end there. By the end of the week, it was no longer settled. He was outright pressuring me to reconsider. "It's Christmas," he said one night, his tone tinged with frustration. "It's important to my mom. She's really hoping you'll come." And just like that, the pieces started to fall into place. It wasn't just him pushing me, it was her. Something she'd said during that phone call had planted this urgency in him, this need to convince me. And now, I was caught in the middle of it. I felt a knot form in my stomach. It wasn't that I didn't like his mom, I did. She was warm and welcoming in her own way, but she could also be persistent. She had her expectations, and once she set her mind on something, it was hard to change her course. It wouldn't surprise me if she'd made it clear that my absence would be a disappointment, or even worse, taken it as some kind of slight against the family. Still, I couldn't understand why my boyfriend couldn't see the bigger picture. Why he couldn't see that this wasn't about Christmas, or his mom, or keeping the peace. It was about my health, my very real, very fragile health. Every time he pushed, I felt more invisible, like my pain and my needs were being minimized for the sake of appearances. "I'm not trying to be difficult," I told him during one of our increasingly tense discussions. "But I have to think about my body right now. My doctor was clear too much activity could cause the cyst to rupture or twist. That's not something I can risk." He nodded, but I could tell he wasn't fully listening. "I just think it would mean a lot to my mom if you were there," he said softly, almost apologetically. And that's what broke me. The realization that, in his mind, my presence at Christmas was about placating his mom. Not about my well-being, not about what I could realistically handle, but about keeping the peace. I wanted to scream, to shake him, to make him understand how deeply that hurt. Instead, I felt myself shutting down, retreating inward. I didn't know how to make him see that this wasn't a choice for me. It wasn't about being stubborn or uncooperative. It was about survival. It's frustrating, deeply frustrating. Every time I try to explain how I feel, how this situation is impacting me physically and emotionally, it feels like I'm talking to a wall. My boyfriend doesn't argue, doesn't yell, doesn't even really engage. Instead, he shuts down. It's as though by not responding, he can avoid the weight of my words altogether. But I know he's heard me. I see it in the way his shoulders tense, in the way he avoids my eyes when I bring it up. And then there's the unanswered question that hangs heavy between us. What exactly did his mom say? He won't tell me, and that silence feels like a betrayal in itself. I know her well enough to guess that she probably framed my decision as something selfish or inconsiderate, perhaps painting it as me not caring about family traditions or not making an effort. I can almost hear her voice in my head, urging him to do something or make her understand. But what she doesn't understand, what I desperately wish he would stand up for, is that this isn't about her, or him, or even me being difficult. It's about the very real, physical limitations I'm facing right now. The fact that he's letting her influence him like this makes it feel like I'm being forced to defend my pain, my boundaries, my choices. And that, more than anything, is what's triggering for me. I've been here before, being expected to push past my limits, to prioritize someone else's comfort over my own needs. It's a pattern I promised myself I'd never fall into again, but here I am, teetering on the edge of giving in just to avoid the conflict. I keep replaying our conversations in my head, searching for some reassurance, some acknowledgement of what I'm going through. But every time I bring up how his behavior is making me feel, he shuts me out. The dismissive nods, the quick change of subject, it's all too familiar. It feels like he's trying to sidestep the issue entirely, as if by ignoring my feelings, they'll somehow cease to exist. What hurts the most is the implication that keeping the peace with his family is more important to him than my health and well-being. I see it in the way he hesitates before answering me, in the way he skirts around my pain as though it's an inconvenience rather than a reality. And that realization cuts deeper than I ever thought it could. I thought we were a team. I thought he understood what this was doing to me, not just physically, but emotionally, too. I've found myself questioning everything. Am I being unreasonable? Am I overreacting? Should I just grit my teeth, plaster on a smile, and go? The voice of doubt is insidious, whispering that maybe I'm making too much of this, that maybe I should suck it up for his sake. After all, it's only one day, right? But then I remember the searing pain that shoots through my body with the slightest movement, the weight of the cyst pressing down on my nerves, the fear of what could happen if I push too hard. And I know this isn't something I can compromise on. So, am I right? Is he minimizing my pain and feelings? The answer is yes, and it hurts to admit that. I wish I didn't have to feel this way. I wish he could see me, truly see me, and understand that what I need most right now is his support, not his pressure. But instead, I feel like I'm standing alone in this, forced to advocate for myself when all I want is for someone else to fight for me for a change. The truth is, I don't have the energy to fight this battle. Not with him, not with his mom, not even with myself. All I can do is hold firm in my decision and hope that, eventually, he'll understand. Because if he doesn't, if he can't, then I'm not sure what that means for us. I love him, but love isn't enough if it comes at the cost of my own well-being. In the end, I know this: I'm not being unreasonable. I'm not overreacting. I'm simply prioritizing my health, my safety, my peace of mind. And if that's too much for him or anyone else to accept, then that's something they'll have to come to terms with on their own. As for me, I'll be here, waiting for surgery, waiting for relief, and learning, slowly but surely, how to put myself first.